All right, guys, this video is one that I'm not really looking forward to making into releasing because it's kind of like the end of an era, but it's just time to pull off the Band-Aid. It's time to get it out in the open. I have too many project cars. I don't have enough time or space or resources to work on them all and build them all how I want. So it's time to let one go. See, at one point this summer, we actually had a total of 6 vehicles in the family. And we live in a small residential neighborhood. I'm lucky enough to have like a cement parking pad out beside the garage. But every single space was full. And every time I wanted to move something in and out of the shop, I had to do like the 3-car shuffle. And it's a pain in the butt. Now, on top of that, the plans that I had for this particular vehicle, they just didn't work out the way that I had originally anticipated. I had big plans for it, but once it kind of came down to it and I started, penciling out the numbers and how it was supposed to work out, it just didn't make any more sense. I had some renderings done and I'm like, nope, totally is not going to work how I want it to. So we got to get rid of some cars. Now, luckily, about a month ago, I was already able to unload the BMW 5 Series that I picked up. I found a 99 E39 BMW. It was a dine and it was a really, really cool car, but it totally does not fit with the channel. So we decided to let that one go, like I said, about a month ago. So we're down to 5 cars, but I need to trim that down to just 4. So we're going to keep the wife's car, obviously, that's hers. I'm going to keep the AT4, and I have 2 project vehicles that basically I have time to focus on. One of them being the ugly truck, and one of them is the step side, because that I have some big plans for. We are making great headway with that build, but that leaves one truck that I haven't touched, honestly, much at all since I bought it in October of 2020. It's basically sat outside. I've done a bunch of work to it, and I have invested a ton of money into it, probably way more than it's actually worth, but sadly, that's the one that's going to get on the chopping block. The Suburban is for sale. So if you're looking for a big block 3/4 ton SUV that has plenty of room to seat the whole family and enough power to haul all your toys at the same time, look no further than this 99 K2500 Suburban. So under the hood, we have ourselves a 454 cubic inch Vortec big block. That's the Gen 6. And this one is basically stock. We really haven't changed anything yet. I was gonna change a bunch of stuff under here. It does have a little bit newer model computer. I'll get to that in just a minute, along with some of the other upgrades. But basically, this is the big gas motor. I believe it makes 290 horsepower and 410 pound-feet of torque. So plenty of pulling power. Definitely pulls lots of fuel too. It is the 3/4 ton, so it has the full 8-lug suspension, both front and rear. The front suspension and front suspension and brakes has been modified to GMT 800 stuff, so it has big 2-piston calipers, everything brand new up front. Out back, we swapped to a Chevy Express Dana 70 full floating rear axle, and so that's about 5 inches wider than the original 14 bolt, which gives it a really, really nice stance, because if you know about these GMT 400 trucks, originally the back tires stick way in with the 14 bolt full floater, but with the Dana 70, they're bumped out to match the front, and it's still the same 10.5 inch ring gear, and this one has a limited slip and big old disc brakes to boot. As far as the rest of the drivetrain goes, it's got a 4L80 automatic in the middle. I swapped over to an NP241 manual floor shift transfer case. And that's kind of the gist of the Suburban. I'll go into details on all the upgrades that we made in just a second, but why am I getting rid of it? Why did I buy this in the first place, and why didn't those plans work out? So my whole thought process behind buying this particular truck was I wanted to convert it into a GMT 400 Chevy Avalanche. Now, they made those in the GMT 800 platform, and they were based on a Chevy Suburban SUV, but basically they were missing the roof and most of the back part, and it kind of had a bed on there. So I wanted to basically cut here, cut along the window line, graft in a pickup bed, find a pickup cab, and graft in the back window. But after looking at some renderings that I had done, I just realized the proportions would not work out, and I would totally not be happy with how the thing looked after putting in what would be undoubtedly many, many hours of labor. Now, I thought of ways to rescue the build, and maybe I could stretch the wheelbase a little longer, because ultimately what it came down to for me is this space right here. The back wheel is just much too close to the back door if you don't have this roof section here, and then this part hanging out over the back end is just much too long. So I would not be happy with the proportions unless I stretched it, but then basically I have to find under the frame section, I'd have to get a quarter panel from a Blazer because there's a shorter section back here with the gas door in it, and then still find the pickup bed inside so I could dress this out and have it look all nice. And basically at the end of the day, it just wasn't going to work out the way that I wanted without destroying probably 2 or 3 other GMT 400 trucks to get all the donor parts necessary to make it work. And on top of that, the space that I have right now in this shop, there's just not enough room to do it. I need probably 2 lifts to remove the bodies from the frames and all that stuff. And then there's the time factor. I don't have enough of that either. So basically, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough space, and the project just is not going to work out like I wanted it to. Now, all in, I have invested quite a bit of money into this Blazer or Suburban. I know I'm not going to get most of it back. I think I've spent like $10,700, including the purchase price and all the upgrades that I've done with the front and rear suspension. Because basically, the entire drivetrain, the entire suspension and steering is kind of brand new. So real quick, let me kind of take you through the process and the modifications that I've done to the Suburban. So the very first thing I had to take care of on the Suburban was ditching the wheels, because for some reason it came to me wearing a set of 16-inch 2nd gen Dodge wheels. So I hopped on Facebook Marketplace and scored a set of aluminum 16-inch PYO GMC truck wheels, and they look so much better on the Suburban. After that, I had to take care of the 4-wheel drive system because the original NP246 transfer case was grinding and not engaging properly. So I just removed it all together and I installed an NP241 mechanical floor shift transfer case. It's much simpler to operate. All you gotta do is crank back on the lever and you've got 4-wheel drive. After that, I wanted to make the truck just a little bit more aggressive sounding, but not too loud, so I installed a single Spintech Pro Street 9000 muffler in the original exhaust system, and I gotta say, I love how it sounds. It's definitely a little bit more aggressive, but not overly obnoxious, so you could cruise in this thing all day long without getting a headache. Next up, I needed to dress up the interior because the original front leather split bench seat was totally trashed. So it came out and I replaced it with a set of cloth bucket seats from a similar year Blazer. Now in between the front seats, I installed a GMT 800 floor center console, which in my opinion looks a whole lot better in these trucks than the original GMT 400 console would have. However, it did require that I made a custom bracket to get it to bolt down to the floor. Next, I removed the original black box computer that ran the 454 and I replaced it with an LS1 style 0411 PCM. This lets the truck run a whole lot smoother, but also gives you more tuning options in case you decide to do any aftermarket upgrades to the engine, like a camshaft or headers, things that I was planning on doing but never got around to. Next was the big one, the rear axle swap. This bugged me ever since I bought the truck, but basically the original 14-bolt full floater was just too narrow and it looked awful in my opinion. Not only that, the 14-bolt had an open differential, so I replaced it with a Dana 70 Super from a 2004 Chevy Express 3500. It has a 4:10 ratio, a 10.5-inch ring gear, so it's just as strong as the 14-bolt, but to get it under the Suburban, I had to relocate the spring perches, cut off the shock mount, and clean and paint everything up. On top of that, it's got all new brakes, down to the parking brake shoes, the rotors, the pads, the brackets, the calipers. Everything is brand new on the rear axle, and it's painted to match, and it looks great. Not only that, the stance is perfect. After that, I took care of some of the most problematic items on the 7.4 Vortec, the fuel injectors and the fuel pressure regulator. It's got a new Delco regulator on it, but the injectors are upgraded to 36 pound/hour fast injectors, just in case, once again, I ever got around to those aftermarket upgrades, but they work just fine on the stock 454. Lastly, I took care of all the front suspension by replacing everything with upgraded GMT 800 2500 HD stuff, which means it has new lower and upper control arms, new spindles, new unit bearings, new disc brakes, and most importantly, larger twin piston calipers that make this truck stop so much better than it did before. Not only that, all the bushings and ball joints are brand new. It's got new brake hoses. Basically every ounce of the suspension has been replaced with brand new stuff, and it's riding on a set of 4 brand new Bilstein shocks. So that pretty much covers all the good stuff and all the new parts that we've done to the Suburban, and overall I'd say it's really, really solid, especially if you're comparing this to a vehicle that spent any time in the Northeast. But it's not without its flaws, so let me just kind of go over a lot of those real quick. And unfortunately, I did overlook most of these because when I bought the truck, I was planning on cutting in half and getting rid of it. So like this, for example, right here, there's a little bit of body filler and it's kind of flaking off. There's some rust underneath, and it looks like at some point, maybe the truck was in a fender bender or something, and they did a little bit of body work there. They painted it and just didn't do very good prep work. So we got this spot right here where the paint's kind of chipping and peeling. And then likewise up here on the front of the roof is kind of doing the same thing, and there's a few little bubbles of rust up there. Nothing leaks on the inside, but definitely something that you ought to be aware of. On the hood, basically we got some standard GM clear coat peeling. That's kind of what all my trucks have on it, to be honest. But this side of the truck for the most part looks a lot better. Of course, there's all the normal door dings. The family that had this before me had a million kids, so the doors were undoubtedly open and closed into parked cars many, many times. I do have the original running boards if you want those. I did add a front valance on there to kind of dress it up because the 3/4 tons don't have it. On the inside, once again, lots of kids. The carpets they've had many, many sodas spilled on them. So the carpets are definitely not the cleanest. You know, like a lot of GM interiors, the seats have kind of seen better days. The fronts are cloth because I swapped those over, but the backs still are leather. Originally this had the split bench, which I did not like. Like all the floor mats and stuff are there, but basically the interior is there. It's complete, it functions, the AC works, the heat works, but it's definitely seen better days. Out back, I'll show you, it does have, I think I mentioned barn doors already. Those are kind of cool, but this just kind of represents the overall condition of the interior. Lots of dirt, lots of stains, although I'm sure if someone wanted to spend some time, they could easily kind of get those out. The windshield does have a crack in it. That's something else that'll have to be addressed. It did just pass emissions here in Utah, so that's good for another year. I think I did it the 1st of November. Speaking of emissions, the catalytic converter, one of those, does make a pretty nice rattle, so it's probably going to have to be replaced at some point, but it did pass emissions at least, and the truck seems to run fine. Just has a really annoying noise coming from underneath it. Other than that, the truck, like I said, at the time that I've owned it, it's been taken care of. I've put a ton of money and effort into it. I'm going to be sad to see it go, but I want to see it go to a good home and somebody who can appreciate it for what it is and you can get some use out of it, because since I've owned it, I think I've put less than 2,000 miles on the Suburban, and I just hate to see it sit. I've got other projects that take up all my time, so fortunately, this one's got to go. So one more thing worth mentioning, when I bought the Suburban about a year and 2 months ago, back in October of 2020, the previous owner gave me an envelope about an inch thick, just full of paperwork and receipts of stuff that they had done to the Suburban. And it does have a newer engine that they installed. It's not a brand new one, but it was, you know, just a low mile junkyard engine they had put in. And they also had the transmission rebuild, along with a zillion other like little odds and ends, you know, things like water pump, AC compressor, hoses, and miscellaneous whatever. And so when you combine that with all the stuff that I've done, mechanically, this is one rock solid truck. Cosmetically, it definitely could use some help, and I showed you most of the worst parts. But if you compare this to a truck that spent a lot of time up, like for where I'm from, for example, up in Maine, like this would be $1 million truck practically, because there is not a bit of rust on the underside. It's as solid as can be, although dented and faded and the paint's peeling off of it on the top side. So I get it, it's not a 1 in a million find, but it's definitely a really solid truck for someone to either use or to make into a project of their own. Now, I will be sad to see it go, because GMT 400s are like one of my absolute favorite body styles of trucks. I mean, someday I'm gonna build another one. It probably won't be a Suburban, maybe a 2-door Blazer. Kind of like one of my bucket list trucks is a 99 K2500 crew cab short box truck. Those are like top of the list for me, but I think they kind of are for everybody. But Behind that, the single cab short boxes, those are another one of my favorites. So someday I will build another GMT 400 on the channel. I can promise you guys that, and it's going to be way cooler than this one is going to ever be. So, you know, don't worry, we're not giving up on the GMT 400s just yet, but this particular one, it's got to go. So the question of asking price is probably going to come up, and I honestly don't even know what to ask for it. All I can tell you is how much money I've spent on it, which doesn't always represent what I'm going to get for it. And I don't expect to get $10,700. That's what I've invested in the truck. I'll tell you what I paid for it. I think I paid like $4,500 for the truck. So to be honest, what I'd like to get for it is something in between those two numbers. I want to be fair. I don't have to sell it. I'm definitely not going to, well, I'm going to lose money on it, but I'm definitely not going to take a lot less than what I paid for it. But if you're interested, if you have any questions about it or anything you want to discuss, email me, tolmanperformance@gmail.com. I'll put the link on the screen and down in the description below. Fire me off an email with any questions or concerns or comments, or do you want more pictures, or you want more details? I'll be happy to get that for you. That is going to bring this video to an end. I apologize. It's not as interesting as some of the stuff we've been doing lately. Normally we're in the shop here, we're working, and we're actually building something that's cool or fast. And we'll get back to that next time, but this was a holiday week, so I didn't have quite as much time. By the way, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, if you guys celebrate all that stuff. I just hope you have a good time with your family and your loved ones, because that's what this time of year is all about. So anyway, thank you guys for watching from the bottom of my heart. I do appreciate you guys. You make it possible for me to be able to do what I do, build trucks and make cool content. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. We'll catch you again soon.